In the 1930s, when people thought about the next war, there are two writers that really epitomize the general imagery that people had. H.G. Wells, in his book The Shape of Things to Come, and Olaf Stapleton, and his book Last and First Men, both describe the next war as a war where people, upon declaration, take off in massive air fleets, pass each other by, the German fleet on its way to Britain, the British fleet, air fleet on its way to Germany, and sort of wanly salute at one another, and then disgorge their massive quantities of mustard gas on every enemy population center. You don't need atomic weapons or a supergerm to destroy the world. To destroy human civilization, mustard gas, properly applied, is quite sufficient. Thank you very much. Could knock us back to the Stone Age. And in both The Shape of Things to Come and Last and First Men, the result was that Europe and the world, in the case of H.G. Wells' story, becomes a charnel house, a graveyard of the civilizations that were there. They are gone, destroyed in a single orgy of mass destruction. So, when Neville Chamberlain, finally on September 3rd, 1939, 3 days after Poland is attacked by Hitler, makes his declaration of war, which is going to be included as an associated video. You'll get to see it and hear it. Immediately after the Prime Minister's speech, there is an air raid siren warning throughout Greater London, and everyone just hears the news of war. The world drops out from under them, and then they all have to scramble for some kind of shelter because the fear is that the German gas fleets are already on the way. Well, that didn't happen. It was not a real air raid. In fact, during the phony war, the first phase of the war, before the Western Front opened up, Britain refrained from bombing Germany with anything but leaflets saying, stand up to Hitler, which nobody's going to do in the face of the Gestapo and the SS. The war against English and German population centers that everyone expected, thank God, didn't happen. But it didn't stop people from developing and distributing infant gas masks, which are these little chambers with a manual pump that you use to pump air in through the filters and pump old air out. A world that needs baby gas masks. That's what everyone was expecting. Remember, the prevalence in the West of the ideas of the merchants of death and the foolishness of patriotism and the terror of a new high-tech air war that would destroy all of human civilization. One of the great blessings of human history is possibly that Hitler himself was gassed at the end of World War I and therefore never ordered, not even to the point when he was swallowing his own Walther pistol and just depressing the trigger. At no point did he authorize the use of poison gas against enemies in combat. That was not the case with the Jews or other concentration camp victims, but certainly in combat, there was going to be no use of poison gas. But nobody knew this yet. Nobody really understood this at the beginning of World War I. And the truth is that could have changed. Had Hitler landed troops in Britain, Churchill probably would have used gas on them. And had we had to invade the home islands of Japan, they probably would have used gas on us. But thank goodness those things didn't happen. So, what does happen is that the Axis powers and the Allied powers start a chain that goes to war. But it's not like the slow burn of the alliance system in World War I. Who were the Axis? Well, it starts out As at around the time that Mussolini approves the Anschluss of Austria, Hitler and Mussolini declare a treaty that makes them the new axis of the world. The world will now spin around the Rome-Berlin axis. And when the Japanese join this alliance, it will be the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo axis. But while it's theoretical that there could be the axis of the world describing the path between Rome and Berlin, there is no way where you would have Tokyo be a part of that. But still, the term is used, the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo axis, or Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and Fascist Italy. Those are the Axis powers. The Allied powers tend to be the alliance of France and Britain. And then when France surrenders, Britain stands alone. And then when Germany attacks the Soviet Union, the British and the Soviets. And then when the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, the British, the Soviets, and the Americans, the Allies, which ultimately are called the United Nations and becomes the precursor to the UNO, the United Nations organization we know today. So it's the Allies versus the Axis versus the Allies. Now, when Hitler invades Poland on September 1st, 1939, after the ludicrous pretext of dressing convicts up as Polish soldiers and then shooting them outside a radio station and claiming that Poland attacked Germany. Remember, Hitler is enabled in this by the alliance that he and Joe Stalin signed, the Hitler-Stalin Pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, or the Nazi-Soviet Pact of August 1939, basically has secret provisions that guarantee that the Soviets and the Germans are going to invade and divide up all the microstates of Eastern and Central Eastern Europe. So, Hitler invades Poland September 1st, 1939. September 3rd, 1939, Britain declares war, France declares war, and it's on. Now, what everyone expects is that the Germans, even though they control territory to the north, to the south, in Slovakia, to the north and East Prussia, and throughout the entire arc of the western border of Poland, despite the advantage that Germany has coming in from all of these various angles. The Polish army is not small, and the Polish have an air force. The Polish have a strong desire never to be partitioned again. And what everyone expects is for the Germans to slowly begin to strangle Poland, but that they'll do so at the pace of a First World War offensive, taking months or years, and where trench warfare is an adequate defense. But Hitler is not employing trench warfare. Hitler has accepted, to an extent anyway, a new theory of battle tactics put forth by a German tank commander named Heinz Guderian. And Guderian's tactics are based on some British theoretical work and some ideas that people have had since the 1920s, but no military high command took seriously until Hitler. Here's the difference between trench warfare, which is what everyone expects, and Blitzkrieg, which is what Hitler and the German army bring to the world. Trench warfare essentially involves human wave attacks across a no man's land on a broad front, supported by artillery, where you have a mass of human bodies surging at the enemy lines who are also defended by artillery and machine guns and rifles, and it's a broad attack. A trench warfare attack is like an open-faced slap. It's broad, it creates a shock over a large area. It is a mass attack, a human wave attack. That's trench warfare. Blitzkrieg are from the German words lightning, blitz, and war, Krieg. Blitzkrieg is lightning war. And what it relies upon is the coordination of armored units, of mechanized units in trucks, and of air units and artillery targeting one spot in the enemy line, say here. And that spot is not going to be sharing the attack with the rest of the line, like in trench warfare, big open hand slap. No. This is much more like a stab, like a knife thrust or a sword thrust. What you have is, towards the predetermined point, an armored wedge of tanks surges forward to that particular spot. Behind those tanks are mechanized infantry, Panzer Grenadiers they're called. And these guys basically are foot soldiers that follow the tanks through and protect the flanks of the tanks, said that 10 times fast, against counterattack, anti-tank rifles and weapons and things like that. Simultaneous to the tank advance, you have dive bombers, in this case Stuka dive bombers of the German Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, hitting the same spot that the tanks are going to go through. So whereas in World War I, it takes weeks or months to gather enough artillery pieces to target an area of attack and then to pulverize that area with days or weeks of fire and then send your human wave attack. In the case of the Germans, it's not that sort of open hand. It's a stiletto strike. It is the strike of a rapier. It's the strike of a piercing weapon, an edged weapon that is designed to do what an arrow does to armor. You hit medieval armor with a club, you're distributing the force of your attack across a large area and the armor will absorb it. But when you shoot a longbow arrow at armor, at the point of contact, you've got that arrow with all the force of the longbow behind it, all the momentum of the inertia of the arrow behind it, and that one spot of armor needs to keep out all that force, and it usually can't. Well, Blitzkrieg follows the same model, like a longbow shooting through armor, like a sword thrust cutting through armor. By putting all of your force onto one spot, you cut through. And so what the Germans do is they cut through the Polish lines, slicing through from all directions, and then their regular infantry surrounds and destroys in detail the various sections of the pockets of the Polish army that are now behind German lines. Germany then moves on Warsaw, the capital of Poland, on the Vistula River, and basically for a short period of time lays siege to it. Now, for 21 days, the Poles are begging the British and French to do something, anything to help us. And the British and French say, don't worry, help's on the way. But again, look at the geography. Britain, France, Germany, Poland. How the British and French propose to relieve Poland is anyone's guess. But I guess what the Poles hope, at least, is that the French will advance into Germany, maybe into the Rhineland, or that the British will launch an attack somewhere on the German north coast. Something. Maybe the British will bomb Germany's Rhine river dams. Something to allow the Poles to get some relief, because the Poles believe, rightly, that the German army is extremely weak along the western Siegfried Line defenses of Germany. On September 21st, there is an attack. The Soviet Union attacks. And when the Soviets attack, they're not attacking Germans, they're attacking Poles. And the Soviets quickly move up to their lines. They also take Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia within succeeding weeks. So the Poles are sandwiched between the Soviets and the Germans. And what you're looking at now is a border between the German zones and the Soviet zones of control that divides Poland up, basically like this. Germany gets the center, and Russia gets the east. And the West, well, it's really sad. Oh yes, it is really sad.